My name is Jim LaRocco. I was a career diplomat for over 30 years, mainly in the Middle East, also in the Far East. And then I served after that as working particularly on the Middle East for the next 10 years for the Department of Defense and as head of an international organization that kept the peace between Egypt and Israel. And I want to talk about that this morning because I was in Taiwan as the number 2 person in 1993 when I had the typical Foreign Service experience. I get a phone call and they say, "We need you in Tel Aviv." And I said, "Really?" "Yes, we do." And I said, "When?" And they said, "Tomorrow." And I said, "Well, can you give me 4 days? You know, I have a wife and 3 kids. I'll go to school." They said, "Well, they can stay there, but we need you." So off I went. And a few months after that, we had our agreement between the Palestinians and the Israelis, the Oslo Agreement. Now, I want to fast forward to the spring 2 years after that, in 1995. I had been the chargé for almost a year. Tel Aviv is a difficult post. And Bill Perry was coming, the Secretary of Defense at the time. And Yitzhak Rabin was almost so depressed that it was very, very hard to even see him present at that time. We had such a string of terrorist incidents that had killed so many people. And he was so determined and had taken such bold risks for peace, and even he began to wonder. So I decided that I would host at the ambassador's residence, which I really wasn't living in, a dinner for Rabin and Bill Perry. So at the beginning, I stood up and I said, "I would like to say some remarks and then a toast." And I could see Rabin kind of slumped over in his chair. And I said, "From 1978 to 1981, I was stationed in Cairo, and I worked on the Camp David Treaty, which was approved in 1979. Then our first child was born in 1980, at the beginning of the year. The Egyptians called her Noura, which means light, because her eyes were so radiant. We called her Stephanie. Anyway, she had a very difficult birth and had a massive knot in her neck. And as parents, for the first time, we were frantic. And we knew we couldn't fly her somewhere because she was days old. I had the most wonderful ambassador, Roy Atherton, and his wife, Betty. And they were so approachable, and I went to them, and they knew we had just had a baby, and I said, "What do we do?" And they said, "We'll take care of it." 2 hours later, he calls me back and he says, "Jim, I called Sadat. Sadat called Begin. And they agreed that you will be the first family to drive from Cairo to Jerusalem." And there we were, a family of 3, sounds a little biblical, going the other direction though, going to Israel, and our little Fiat convertible. And we screamed across the Sinai with this big military convoy. Hard to keep up as our little thing is bouncing. And then we get to the border, and the convoy disappears. And there's 2 young soldiers standing there, smiling, an Egyptian and Israeli. And they said, in their broken accents, "We welcome the peace baby." And we went to Hadassah Hospital, and there was a wonderful doctor there. Israel at that time had more doctors per capita than any country of the world. His name was Dr. Ashkenazi, which of course all of the Israelis in the audience, including Rabin, warmed. It's a great name if you know Judaism. And he was able, through therapy and no surgery, to remove that knot. And I then commented to the group, I said, you know, this is really what peace is all about. We were one of the first to enjoy the fruits of peace. It's when parents and children and grandparents and grandchildren can go to sleep at night without fear, have dreams and wake up and try to fulfill those dreams. And I said, this is why we must stay the course. And I said, let's all toast that we can help more families have the quiet miracle of a normal life. Started to walk back to my chair, and Rabin grabbed my arm and he said, Jim, I really needed that. I will never, as long as I live, allow the enemies of peace to defeat us. He, of course, only 6 months later was assassinated. But I will never forget those words, and I believe all those who work for peace should really understand what this is all about. It's not a piece of paper. It's about normal people living their lives with hope and without fear.